What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I wanted to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets. I'm going to break down more news involving Tesla and what you should be watching for as time goes on. Not to mention the fact that we are looking for some new developments on the charts that could be more promising. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you are guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. The offer ends very soon in just about 12 days. Anyways, for Tesla, we're doing a good job at holding up. Tesla gapped up and pushed almost 7% for the day as we got some big news that came out. For the market as a whole, we also got some bad news for Nvda, which caused it to dip just a bit. So the market was kind of sandwiched between these pieces of news, but ultimately the bulls had a bigger edge as time went on. So I'm going to talk more about the news in just a few minutes. Just know that as far as the way the charts are going to be moving, Tesla is doing a good job at holding up. And I do think that there could be this nice accumulation right here because we're looking at a potential breakout that has been forming. So we had this like zone right over here, which Tesla's attempting to break out from. And this tends to be a good sign, at least for the share price. With this potentially happening, we'll be watching to see if we get some kind of dip or not before it tries to continue to push. But we're going to be eventually pushing up to some new resistance areas, which will help us pump even more. So with that being said, I will talk more into the details of this and break down what I see at least happening for Tesla and why it still is looking very, very promising to me. But I first want to talk about the news and stuff, then I'll talk about the chart in more detail. So why did Tesla gap up? What is the big news that came out? There's been some talk about how there could be a shift in policy under the next administration, and there's been a lot of talk about FSD being affected by this. So despite the fact that right now under Trump's plan, they're going to be reducing and getting rid of the EV tax incentives, that will be a little bit more negative for Tesla, at least for the shorter term. I do believe that because right now Tesla's in a position where they do depend on their EV sales. But to offset this, and this is why Elon Musk is so in favor of kind of like working with Doge or working with this administration. The reason is because of the fact that they're trying to fast track regulations about self-driving cars. They're going to be very careful with how they regulate. They're going to be giving Tesla a much bigger edge because of Elon Musk's say in this. And this is adding to a lot of like excitement about the fact that they're once again pushing the Transportation Department to develop a regulatory framework for driverless vehicles, citing anonymous sources. And then this is also going to help Tesla develop FSD a lot faster because it's going to give them, once again, a lot more control over these regulations. They're also going to be, once again, limiting what the NHTSA is going to be doing, at least in terms of the changes to investigations that they could be doing. There's been a lot of talk about that, and that's very, very exciting for Tesla. And then with the regulations being less stringent, this could be very, very beneficial as well. And this could help them develop it a lot quicker to release some kind of robotaxis. That's what's getting investors very excited. I also think that you guys can see right over here, right now, there's been a lot of talk about how there's work towards providing a path towards widespread testing for Tesla FSD. And I think that with all of this being put together, this is kind of like what the trade-off is of this administration. So yes, they may negatively affect tax incentives and tax policy, at least for EVs, but the positive that's going to be the trade-off is that they're going to be greatly benefiting the regulations and the development of FSD, and it's going to be a lot quicker, at least under the way things are looking. And that's why Musk has been talking about why it's very important to prioritize that. And in Musk's view, he thinks that FSD is going to be more profitable for Tesla, the next major catalyst, the next big winner. And I think that that's the reason why, he prioritizes this, and he thinks that that's going to be a much better trade-off for Tesla moving forward. So that was very, very bullish news that came out for Tesla. There was some negative news that came out involving Nvda, some talk about how particular chips are overheating. Not the best of news for them. That's why the share price dipped a bit. But I just want to note that according to my research, I haven't really seen Nvda confirm this quite yet. So this hasn't been confirmed yet about the overheating issue. That's why I don't think Nvda dumped too hard. I just saw a small dip only to get bought back up. Now, that's why the market was kind of flat during the pre-market before seeing some buyers trying to defend it, which is exactly what we were predicting from yesterday. Tesla saw 123 million in volume above average, which is some good news. And then RBC Capital gave Tesla an outperform rating, which is more good news for Tesla. The price-price ratio is going up again as Tesla's building some strength. And in terms of seasonality, we tend to see more volatility on Mondays. We're green about 53% of the time. Tuesdays are also green about 51% of attempts, not too bad for Tesla. And look for more volatility at 11 a.m. and then 1 p.m. For the market as a whole, very flat day for most sectors in terms of finance and retail. We did see some exceptions, such as Tesla and Google trying to push, whereas Nvda was flat alongside Apple a little bit in the green. So that's what we're seeing so far. Very, very mixed market. Know this, guys. Tomorrow for earnings, we have Walmart and Lowe's announcing their earnings. And then for Wednesday, we have Neo, Target, TJ Maxx, and the Wix announcing earnings before market open, and Nvidia and Snow announcing earnings after market close. Nvidia is going to be the biggest one for the week, affecting Teslas. Don't forget about that. There's just housing data tomorrow. There's not really much data that's coming out. The housing data comes out before market open at 8:30 a.m., but everything else is quite minor. The last thing to talk about before I talk about the charts will be this. Right now, the market's more neutral. We are seeing some buyers stepping in, but overall, momentum remains a little bit more greedy, and we're getting closer to greed. But neutral is still where we're currently at. The put to call option ratio is at neutral because we're seeing this bounce attempt. But the issue is the fact that despite puts being bought, there's a slowdown in the rate at which they're being bought right now. So that's slowing down. And as a result, that's what's making this a lot more neutral. So there's not as many shorts piling in right now. The VIX is also trying to slow down a bit as it hits some tough resistance. So we're waiting to see what kind of reaction we get. But with that being said, guys, I think that's it for my analysis of what's happening with data. Now I just want to focus on nothing but the charts. So as far as Tesla goes, we got this nice little gap up like structure looking pretty good. But what tends to happen in a pattern like this is we do sell off a bit before we try to bounce. That is typically what tries to happen. I think that regardless of what happens, Tesla has upside coming. So if we get some kind of dip, it's going to eventually run to the 360s over the next few weeks. And if we don't get that dip, we could just be running straight to the 360s. I am bullish on Tesla nonetheless because of these new developments and the big pieces of news. Now, what's interesting about Tesla, we are range bound right now. Tesla has these supports at 336 and 330. If 330 fails, let's look for 326, followed by the gap fill all the way down towards 322. If we break past 347, we're looking for a push into the 350s. My gut tells me because of this wick that formed in the slowdown that's forming, this is actually a nice accumulation structure. So what tends to happen is you dip a bit before we continue to go higher. So looking at Tesla, we might try to pop in the morning. There might be a liquidity grab moment where we come back down close to the lower 330s. Could we go to the 320s? I'm not 100% sure about that, but it's always a possibility. And then later on down the line, we get the small dip, then a bounce. There should be a nice bounce coming later on towards the end of this week, if not by the next couple of weeks. And I still think we're setting up for a very, very big move to the upside. So tomorrow we might consolidate in the morning, look for a pop upon open around the 342 area, then a dip back down. We retest 336 most likely. Maybe the lower 330s, we'll have to see about that. And then Tesla should attempt to bounce after that. Tesla will also be impacted by Nvidia's earnings on Wednesday, so just keep that in mind. So make sure you watch your levels very closely. A dip is likely coming, then a bounce afterwards. As far as SPY goes, it's the same thing. SPY is in a very, very critical place. We have this tough resistance at 589. If we break that, we could be attempting to go up to about 592 to fill the gap above. If we close above 589, we're looking for the 590s. If we end up losing 585, we turn more bearish to dip lower. So these are the gaps to watch for. So on SPY, if we break 589, we're going to be looking for that gap fill on the daily to about 593. There's going to be a bigger pump if we break resistance. If we get a rug pull, let's just say after Nvidia's earnings, we fail to hold 585, we could be dipping down to fill this gap towards these lower levels. We'll be looking for 580 as the main support and 576 below that. Which way are we going? I think that what's going to happen first is we're going to try to push a bit. I don't think the market's done quite yet. We're going to be looking for a small dip towards the 587 area, then a bounce to about 589. And we'll see if we break past that or not to push higher. I think we're going to consolidate in that range for some time. And then Nvidia's earnings is going to be the next big factor to affect whether or not we get a bounce. Now, I think the most likely possibility is we will essentially attempt this push. And I think that's going to be very, very important for the way we develop. So tomorrow morning, look for a dip back down to this imbalance towards 587. And then we may try to bounce back up for 589, just consolidate in the range for now until we get Nvidia's earnings. For those who are interested in the QQQ, I'll talk about this first. It's the same thing, essentially. I do anticipate it's going to be dipping a bit. So the QQQ has this key support at 495. If that fails, we go back down towards 491.82. And we also have a gap below to fill. If we break and hold above 500 and close above that on a daily close, we're looking for 503 and then 506 as our potential targets. I think that the QQQ might be dipping closer to this imbalance, taking us down towards 498 or below before this tries to bounce back up. So watch and see if that ends up being the case. On the daily time frame, we're kind of stuck in the middle. We could attempt to dip just a bit back down to this imbalance in the 498 area or below before we see some buyers defend us and take us back up towards 500 to continue to consolidate as the most likely possibility. So if we lose the 496 area, we have this gap all the way down here around 492. If we break this resistance around 502 after Nvidia's earnings, we likely push up for that other gap fill. I presume tomorrow what's going to happen is we dip a little bit. We're going to see a small dip in the morning to about 498. Then buyers will defend us back up to 500. We'll see if we close above that or not. We might get a consolidation day because we're still waiting for Nvidia's earnings. So that's most likely what I see for the QQQ. For others out there, we have ES. Now, ES looks more bullish than SPY. I think that there's a big divergence between them now. But one thing worth mentioning is that we are trying to uptrend right here. As long as we don't lose 5,900 and then 5,870, this is favoring a little bit of a push for 5,940. I think we might dip a little bit towards like the lower 5,900s, then we try to bounce, start pushing for 5,939. And this is forming a nice accumulation right over here. So this might accumulate just like this before it tries to push for 5,940, and we'll see what happens after that. There's a good chance we dip a bit before we try to push higher, so give this the time it needs. For Nvidia, we're on a bit of a downtrend here, but I do think that this is going to try to rebound for 142. Tomorrow is going to be one of the last days before earnings. We have 2 days left, basically. We have tomorrow, then we have Wednesday, and then after market close on Wednesday, we have their earnings. So I think that this might attempt to push a bit for 142 as the most likely possibility. As long as we don't lose 138 to turn bearish, I think the odds are favoring 142 most likely, as where we're going to be heading towards. Bitcoin's on a bit of an uptrend right here, trying to hold our 20 EMA. If we lose 90,464, we're going to be fine. We could dip closer to like 88,000 if that's the case. But even if we do lose that, we're going to be fine. If we hold this, we're looking for 92,000. I think Bitcoin's going to hold this 20 EMA and push for 92,000 tomorrow for a small bounce. Then we'll see what happens after that. For other factors out there, we have NQ, which is trying to uptrend right over here very nicely. I think there's a very, very good chance that we will attempt to continue this push as long as we don't lose 20,530. This is favoring a push for about 20,750. Look for a dip to about the lower 20,600, then a bounce back up for 20,750, and we'll see what happens after that. For Apple, we have a nice accumulation right over here that's developing. We're going to be looking for an attempt to push, so look for a small dip for about 226 and a bounce back up towards that 230 area. And if that breaks, we're looking for a bigger pump. I think we might dip a little bit on Apple for 226.25 before it tries to bounce back up. So watch and see how it goes from there. For Neo, we called out the head and shoulders properly. We were correct about this. And then I said that after this planned out, we're looking for a bounce as we approach earnings on Wednesday. Lo and behold, Neo is trying to bounce. As long as we don't lose 4.66, I favor upset for 4.88. So this might be trying to push higher for this next imbalance, as long as we don't lose that support. Netflix was dipping after the Paul and Tyson fights, but here's the thing. And by fight, I mean like the scripted fight, whatever you want to call it. But anyways, there was some big news that came out for Netflix about how they're going to be streaming more NFL games. On Christmas, there's going to be one that's streamed, not to mention Beyonce is going to be doing a performance during it. So that's why Netflix is now pushing very, very nicely. We have this new support building. This is previous resistance becoming support at 840. If we lose that, we're looking for a dip back down to 826. As long as we hold that, we're looking for the 850s. So we'll see how this goes. I do favor 850 plus as Netflix looks a bit more bullish. For CELH, as long as we don't lose 25, we're favoring a pushback up for 26 plus. So it looks a little bit more bullish to me. Supermicro looks very bullish right now. We got some bullish news, not to mention the fact that it avoided being delisted. So if we don't lose 28, this is favoring a pushback up for them balance at 31.73. Then higher levels all the way back up for 35 plus are most likely coming. For Palantir, we have resistance at 61.2. We had some bad news that came out that caused us to dip. We're going to be looking for an attempt to get back up towards 57.5 to 56.64 in this range. We got to reclaim 61.22. Otherwise, we could be dipping closer to about 56 to 58 in that range. I think it might dip a little bit more before it tries to bounce. So just keep that in mind. For other tickers out there, we have the notorious Rivian. Rivian is also looking a little bit weaker. It's on a bit of a downtrend here. I think that it might dip a little bit lower for about the 10 flat area before it tries to bounce again. Look for a small dip after this big red bar before it tries to rebound, so keep that in mind. There's a nice uptrend on SoFi. We'll have to see if we hold our 20 EMA. As long as we don't lose 13.5, so we're looking for a pushback up for 14.25. So watch and see how this ends up moving. We're looking for a pump attempt right over here for 14.25. The IWM Russell 2000 is just consolidating. We'll have to see if we break past 232. I presume it's going to be basing at 226.75 to 228 in that range. So look for a little bit more downside before this thing makes a big move to bounce. So just keep that in mind. For AMD, we look a little bit more bullish with this rising or this falling wedge that's forming. We need to break 139.8. If that's the case, we're looking for 143.5. It looks a little bit more bullish here, especially as we approach NVIDIA's earnings. I think NVIDIA's earnings will be a big factor for this, but I could be looking for an attempt for 143.5. ARM is looking a little bit like it wants to bounce as well. We could be looking for an attempt for 131. If that breaks, we're looking for 133.61 as our main resistance. As long as coin does not lose 299, I think we're favoring a pushback up for 338. So I favor 338 as our potential target. It might dip a little bit before it tries to bounce, but there's most definitely potential in this chart. Amazon's consolidating. We need to reclaim 203.8. If that's reclaimed, we're looking for 206. If not, we just consolidate between 200 and 204 as the most likely possibility. For Meta, we're a little bit more bearish here after we got this big news that came out. Look for an attempt to retest 550, and we'll see if we bounce off that or not, but I could see a little bit of a dip. So keep that in mind. For Microsoft, we got to reclaim 420. Otherwise, this could dip just a little bit. We might be retesting 412 before it tries to bounce. So watch and see a little bit of a dip to 412 before it attempts to rebound. For Google, we could be on our way back down towards the 174s before we try to bounce again. Look for a little bit more downside before we see a big reaction. GME is kind of flat right here. We'll have to see if we bounce off 26.5 or not. If we don't, we're looking for a dip back down to 25.2. It does look a little bit lackluster. Same thing with AMC, might be dipping for 4.25. DJT is doing a good job at holding up as long as we're above 31.26. I think we're favoring the 36s. The VIX is dipping a bit. We'll have to see if we reclaim 16.43. Otherwise, we're at risk of falling for about the 14s. There's that gap below, so give it some time to develop. The 10-year is dipping, and so is the dollar, which tends to favor upside a little bit more for the markets. So my view of Tesla is quite simple. It is possible we dip a little bit, but this could be forming a nice accumulation. This could be like an inverse head and shoulders that's forming. I would like to see Tesla dip. I would actually prefer it. We'd get a small dip before we get the bounce, and hopefully, if we're lucky, we get that for a buying opportunity. If not, I do favor upside later on for Tesla. When we open, look for a little push into like the mid 340s, maybe a dip back down, a liquidity grab in the 330s after that, and then we'll see if Tesla gets a bounce after that, after hitting 330. So with that being said, I just want to say I really appreciate you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day. Just to be clear, I'll be back tomorrow morning before market open to give you guys another update. Until then, please have a great day and peace out.